Hey woodcutters, TopSaw here. I just got a new pair of Arbpro Evo2 tree climbing boots, and I'm going to talk about old school boots versus new school boots in this video, and then just give an overview of these new Arbpros. So I started tree climbing back in the 80s when I was in high school. I had this mentor who I'd help out doing tree work. And I remember I saved up enough money finally to get a pair of these old school lineman boots. It wasn't these. They were actually West Coast. They had that piece right there so your sole doesn't wear out on the pole, a really high top, a big 3/4 inch or 1 inch shank inside, so that steel spur didn't really cut off all the circulation in your foot, and that giant heel so your spur would just sit in there comfortably. I love my first pair of West Coasts. I went through them, I'd resole them, and when they finally fallen apart and couldn't be rebuilt anymore, I get another pair. And then I think I finally went to the Baileys and Red Dog lineman boots. A lot of generations of them. And these things were great for tree work. But back in the 80s, doing tree work meant climbing up the tree with a set of spurs and cutting that tree down. I don't really remember doing too much pruning back in the 80s. And then kind of in the 90s somewhere, people started integrating in rock climbing gear into their tree climbing setups, but it was still really primarily removals and some pruning, not that much pruning. And then through the 90s, I started phasing out these old giant lineman boots to a little bit lower height, but still heavy boots. And they still work great. I still had steel spurs. The spur pads were still really bad back then. And when you wore spurs without that pad, they just made your shins black and blue. So a high boot or even a medium high boot was really essential. And then I think somewhere in the 90s, somebody came up with the whole idea of a throw bag. Actually, I don't know when somebody came up with it. First time I ever saw a throw bag in tree work was in the 90s. We had these big rubber balls with a screw, eye screw in there and string attached to it. We try and throw it up over the limb and pull our rope up. Doesn't seem like a big idea, but I can't imagine today pruning a tree with spurs on. But back in the day, that's how it was kind of done. And then not long after that, after those old school throw balls, somebody came up with a nice, lead shot, soft weight with a D-ring on it, and you'd throw those up, and those work great. And then not long after that, somebody came up with a big shot. I'm not sure when that was invented, but that was a revolution in tree work. When that big shot came out, I couldn't believe how easy it was to get up in a tree. And then I think right after I got a big shot, I phased out all of these heavy boots to just lightweight hiking boots. And they were great. They were cool in the summer. They were easy to walk around in. They were really comfortable. They didn't really protect your feet in the tree very much. I mean, whenever you stood in a crotch in a tree, your foot would just get sandwiched because the soles were so soft. But they were still great boots, and it was a nice transition. They didn't really have very much ankle height, so your ankles would get torn up as well. And I was using those lightweight hiking boots, all different versions of them, all the time. And I'd throw them away. You could never resole any of those. And then finally, a few years ago, I got my first pair of Arbpro Evo2s. A buddy of mine who owns Tree Safe just kept telling me, you got to get these boots, you got to get these boots. It'll change your whole take on tree work. And a few years ago, I caved in. I bought my first pair. Oh, that doesn't look good. Hopefully that's tree sap and not what it looks like. And I got these boots. And he was right. These things were revolutionary. I loved them. They were actually high enough to protect your ankles. They were stiff enough in the sole to really protect your foot from getting smushed. Spurs actually work great in here. And then with nice spur pads on your spurs, you actually don't need a high length boot. They actually breathed really well, so they kept you cool in the summer, but they kept your foot dry in the winter. You kind of work with them all the way around. They do wear out a little quick because the sole's a little soft. So that's one downside of them, but that's really the only downside. I mean, I've even gone on backpacking trips and worn these because I love the ankle support. I like all of the foot protection, but I also like the lightweightness of them and the breathability and waterproof of them. So these are great boots. They are not chainsaw safe. So you can see right there, I probably tapped my toe with the chainsaw. If I had tapped it a little harder, it would have taken my big toe off. They're not chainsaw safe. That's another downside of them. Cool in summer work is really important, and a good way to stay cool is actually not wear really big heavy boots. So these things are perfect. So I just swapped out these for a new pair, and I just got these in the mail today from Tree Stuff. I'm really excited about them. I've noticed just a couple little changes between these and my old pair. They're both Evo 2s. You can kind of tell the soles are pretty worn out on these. Couple of little changes on them is they do have a little bit better archer. This thing right here looks like a spur is going to hold a little bit better. They do have a lot more rubber up around the back here, and they've rolled the rubber a little bit higher on the toe as well. So I think they might hold up a little bit better. They seem really narrow and tight on my foot, but I'm sure it'll stretch out. They're really a comfortable boot. Other part of these ArbPro 2s that I didn't mention that really changes climbing as well is this sewn in bit of webbing here for a foot ascender. So you used to have to put this foot ascender all over your boot. And then when you were done using that ascender, it was still in the way the whole time. And now you could just clip right in here. These are not life support tie-in points, but they are strong enough to stand up on. But it is important to note that you do need to have a life support system on your saddle into the rope as a #1 safety because these are not life support. But these really make a big difference. Super easy clip. One last thing I'll say about these boots as well, as I get older, I don't compromise on comfort at all. I mean, I'm doing tree work for 8 hours a day. I want to be comfortable, and I teach high school wood shop, so I'm usually doing tree work on my days off. So I certainly want to be comfortable and happy. So even when my gear is even slightly worn, I replace it with really nice, comfortable gear versus back in the day, man, I would try and get every last little bit of life out of anything. So just a quick overview on these ArbPro Evo 2s, how much I love them, how much they have honestly revolutionized tree work for me. I would highly recommend them. Don't hesitate in getting good gear. Get good gear and do the thing right and be comfortable doing it. And if you do that, you'll probably end up being more efficient and you'll be in the trade for a lot longer. This is TopSaw, all things wood, from tree work to woodwork. If you're new to this channel, think about subscribing. If you like this video, hit that like button and the bell for notifications. And if you have any comments on these boots, how they've changed your job as a tree climber, I'd love to hear those down below. And I thank you for watching.